Today, we've got two of the world's foremost experts on selling on the one Amazon marketplace that you probably aren't selling in, but you need to be. Amazon Japan, where sellers are making more profit than all their other Amazon marketplaces. How cool is that? Pretty cool, I think. We know that getting to page 1 on keyword search results is one of the most important goals that an Amazon seller might have. So track your progress on the way to page 1 and even get historical keyword ranking information and even see sponsored ad rank placement with Keyword Tracker by Helium 10. For more information, go to h10.me/keyword tracker. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Serious Sellers Podcast by Helium 10. I'm your host, Bradley Sutton, and this is the show that's a completely BS-free, unscripted, and unrehearsed, organic conversation about serious strategies for serious sellers of any level in the e-commerce world. And it's the middle of the night, almost the middle of the night here, so I'm in my normal attire of what I wear every night here in my house, but the only people that I can go ahead and keep this on and not have to change back to work clothes when I do something at this hour of the day is the two guests here, because they are actually in Japan right now. So we are, makes me feel right at home here with what I'm wearing. We have back on the show, Nick and Gary. Welcome back, guys.
Thank you. It's great to be back. And for those of you guys that are listening, I can see Bradley. He has like a black and white sumo themed, what they call yukata, or like a robe, but he wears it very well. I love the Japanese motif you got going on, man. It's great to see you.
Yes. Thank you for that. Great. Likewise, I haven't seen Nick in a year, but Gary, we saw each other. We had some nice tonkatsu right there in Ginza a while back, a few months ago. My favorite place to eat over there. So it was nice to see you there. But for those who want to get the full backstory, go back, guys, to episode 426 was the first time Gary was on. Nick's been on before then as well. But 426 was from last year, and we had a lot of updates on what's going on in Amazon Japan. And since then, there's been new things, so I wanted to invite you guys back. But I'm not saying this is the reason, but we were talking earlier about how my LA Dodgers was able to sign Ohtani and Yamamoto, my two favorite baseball players, both Japanese. But I'm looking on the 7-Figure Seller Japan Mastermind website at last year's event. And let me just show everybody this, all right? I'm not saying that the Dodgers have me to thank, but last year at this event, I wore my Helium 10 Dodgers-themed jersey. And you can see me here in this picture. I'm explaining something. I'm like, think about it, man. Ohtani's going to come to the Dodgers. He's like, I'm not exactly sure, but I was telling him that the Dodgers are coming. But we're going to talk about your new event this year for sure. I just wanted to call that out, though. Dodgers, let me give you my address. My check should be in the mail. You have me to thank. I set the ground. I set the standard there last year early. Anyways, let's start with Nick. How many years now total have you been in Japan? I know Gary's newer, but how many years do you have under your belt?
I can't even count how many years now, but I came in 1995, so whatever it is from then.
1995, yes, that's quite a while, right? After a few years, just after I moved out. Now, you've been there so long, just like you just said, the years kind of just bleed together. But if we were just to start off with one of the biggest changes in the e-commerce landscape in Japan in the last year, what would it be? This is maybe like the first kind of full year after COVID, and dust is kind of settled. In America at least, there's a lot of the boom that was happening in e-commerce. I wouldn't say went crashing down. Steep decline to pre-COVID time. Something similar in Japan, or how do you view the landscape over there?
Yeah, well, I mean, e-commerce is very, very strong here. It still is very, very strong. Japan, unlike a lot of other countries, has always traditionally had very strong brick and mortar retail. People do like going to stores. But I mean, Japan never had like a full-on lockdown. So most of the stores were open for most of the time. There were small periods where they weren't open. But because we also do retail, we actually do distribution to stores, we've seen that they are really starting to cut back. So there has been a real shift to online. And I've noticed certainly in the last year, I hope no one from Rakuten is hearing this, but I think they're starting to feel a little bit of pain. They've made a few adjustments, and I think there is definitely more of a swing towards Amazon over Rakuten. They are pretty much half and half for their section of the market. No, of the section of the market. So they've both got about 20%.
Yeah. No, I mean, I thought Rakuten was like still way ahead, but that's, that's
I think Amazon has now overtaken Rakuten. It's kind of hard to kind of compare apples to apples, but it does look like Amazon has overtaken Rakuten, and Rakuten have started to do some strange things, cut back on their points program, which has always been their main strategy. That it was their strongest point. The fact that you can collect points. Japanese people get Rakuten points in their lives doing everything. I mean, even my company has a Rakuten bank account. People have Rakuten. They have Rakuten for everything, for travel, for insurance, for everything. And it's to get points. But Rakuten started to kind of cut back on those points. I'm not entirely sure why, but I think that is going to encourage more people to move over. So that's kind of something that I'm seeing personally. Although Rakuten is still a very, very good marketplace here.
All right, interesting. Now going back to Gary, let's take a step back from e-commerce. This is only, what is it, third year in Japan for you?
Third year in Japan, 1 year in Tokyo.
Third year in Japan.
Yeah, 2.5 or 2 years in Okinawa.
How has your family settled in? Now Japanese speaking, culture, food. Is it home now, or still feels a little bit foreign?
Well, I wish my Japanese was better. I mean, my son is 5. He's in like pre-kindergarten. I'm pretty sure his Japanese is going to surpass mine very soon. And but yeah, we're acclimating very well, and we actually just got back from a trip from Hokkaido, which is in the north.
Nice.
Really nice skiing. My wife had they have this drift ice area in the northern part of Hokkaido. Like literally the ocean is like frozen, and my wife had that on her bucket list for many years, and we were able to do that. So very, very fortunate to be here, and very happy.
That's awesome. Yeah, I used to live right south of there in Aomori for about a year and a half. Not quite as cold as Hokkaido. The oceans didn't get frozen over there, but it was cold. I didn't mind that. I went back last year. Yeah, I went back to Aomori for the first time in 25 years. And so it was nice to go out there. My son actually went to Hokkaido. My son took his very first trip without his parents, so his friends, and he actually went to Hokkaido before me. Now, what about e-commerce for you? Like, what have you noticed on your side that has changed, maybe specifically more to Amazon Japan for your network of sellers there in the community?
Selling on Amazon is still very strong. We can get deliveries very quickly. For example, when we went up to Hokkaido, rather than buying like a sled and like lugging it from Tokyo to Hokkaido, we just ordered it off Amazon and shipped it to the hotel. And, my son was thrilled. He was ready to go, right? And so Amazon has that coverage. But one of the biggest changes for e-commerce sellers, foreign sellers especially, importing into Japan is there was a new import law change October of 2023. So previously you could use what they call a importer of record, or IOR. I mean, this is, you're not in Japan. If let's say you're a US seller with an LLC, previously you could use an IOR, a company that's importer of record to represent you to import the products. But now they changed the law because it seems the government is getting smarter when it comes to all of these e-commerce sellers. So now you have to go through ACP. I think that stands for Attorney of Customs process. I might be getting the verbiage mixed up, but basically it's a different scheme, and you may have to pay more in the taxes because you will be billed on the total selling cost. So that's the Amazon cost. So that's one of the big changes that we're seeing so far.
So if somebody was already selling in Japan, they don't need to convert to that. They can keep going with their importer of record, or do they need, now they needed, even if they already have tenure there, they got to switch to this new thing?
Yeah. So it's actually import based. So it's the time that you import. So if you're importing after October 1st, in theory, you can't use IOR. I should probably stress the fact that this is all in theory. I can tell you that there are sellers who are still importing using Chinese freight forwarders who are getting the goods in just totally fine. But in theory, there is no more IOR. And so you have to use this, as Gary was mentioning, ACP, which, although it's not, so the tax and duty is based on the selling price, which doesn't mean it's not exactly on the selling price. You're allowed to remove the costs like Amazon fees and certain things. But the whole concept is that who is the purchaser of the goods? So if you're not a domestic company, if you're an international seller that don't have a registered business in Japan, then the goods being sent to Japan, going to Amazon, going to the customer is the person purchasing the goods. So for tax and duty should be based on what they're paying, as opposed to, for example, for my company, we're based in Japan. So we actually do purchase the goods. We can show a paper trail back to the supplier. We are the purchaser, so we only pay tax and duty on what we buy it for, and then we sell it on Amazon. So it's just the way that the import office or customs office is kind of interpreting. It's all a bit gray, to be honest, but that's kind of how they're interpreting it. The actual final buyer online is the kind of original purchaser of the goods. Therefore, tax and duty should be based off whatever they are paying.
And then so is the customer paying for that then?
No, so the customer isn't paying it. So, but that is what they are using. So it's actually the ACP. Or no, so you have to pay.
Okay.
So
that makes sense.
So your company pays. So the customer isn't paying that, but that's what they're basing it off, and that's their reasoning for it. They are essentially, they're being almost regarded as the importer, which is obviously just ridiculous, to be honest.
But it's not something like in Europe where VAT is applied to what the customer is paying at the time of purchase, and then I believe that, I don't even sell in Europe, so I don't know. I believe the seller has to remit that, or Amazon keeps it, but it's like that price has to include that, and so it's kind of like a surcharge. But how much are we talking about? Like for somebody like me, let's say I'm selling Japan and I'm importing, like are my duties and all these taxes, is it comparable to, what I'm doing by importing from China to US and what I have to pay for customs? Or is it more? Is it less? Well,
it kind of depends on a few different things. Obviously, it depends on the categories and exactly what the products are. You have to remember, so in Japan, the consumption tax is a lot lower than, for example, Europe. You mentioned Europe. So tax is 10% in Japan, or it's 8% if it's for example, food or drink. So, but because they base it on the price that you're selling as opposed to the price that you are actually purchasing the goods for, at that point it will be a bit higher. But there are lots of ways actually around this. And I don't know if Gary's going to mention, there are a lot of countries that have agreements where you don't actually have to pay duty at all, for example. But it does kind of make things smoother and easier if it's a Japanese business doing the import as opposed to an international business. And one of the main ways around it is that you get a company in Japan to do the import for you, and that kind of covers all of the problems. So all the large kind of import companies, that's what they're doing now. They're essentially importing themselves, paying the supplier, and then you only pay the tax and duty on basically the cost of goods. So it all becomes a lot cheaper. So you kind of have like a bit of a middleman in there.
Yeah, makes sense. Now this question is for either of you. So at what point am I having to have my ducks in a row for this? Like, do I need that already when I apply to sell in Japan? I just go into my US, or if I'm a European seller, I go into my European Seller Central and apply to sell in Japan. Are they already asking me for this, ACP, the artist formerly known as IOR, or is that just something I need to take care of by the time I have my first shipment?
It's something you need to take care of yourself. Amazon is not involved in this whatsoever. This is completely...
No, but are they asking me for it, for proof that I have that to apply to an account? No. Okay.
No. So basically, when you want to send goods to Japan, you just speak to your freight forwarder, whoever you use, and the freight forwarder will give you all the information and sort it out for you. It's not something that you really need to do yourself. The freight forwarder will do that. So the freight forwarder has traditionally done IOR. A lot of the Chinese freight forwarders, I said, are still doing it, and they seem to be getting the goods in quite fine. But it's something that you will do through your freight forwarder. So whoever you're using to ship the goods, so it's not something you specifically need to kind of go out and do yourself. in
Right.
most
Yeah.
in circumstances.
Yeah. All right. Makes sense. That's good. Like I thought it was something I had to like, find or maybe, hire a company to handle it. But that's good to know that, like me, for example, when I import from China to US, I actually don't worry about anything. Yes, there are obviously customs. Yes, there's some kind of certification, but actually my sourcing agent, who's also my freight forwarder, she handles all that for me. I'm like, all right, apply, tell me what you need from me, but you take care of everything. That's nice to know that there's something like that where, I don't have to go searching in the Japanese yellow pages for people on my own. So that's good to know.
Yeah, I mean, if it's all set up, there isn't any extra work that needs to be done by you.
Now, Gary, speaking, we're talking about freight forwarding. You had mentioned something interesting. In recent months, obviously, many sellers in Europe were affected, and actually worldwide, about what was going on with the Pirates of the Caribbean there in the Suez Canal,
The Red Sea.
Like that affected shipping prices worldwide because, ships couldn't go there, they didn't want to get shot down and things. And then obviously, there are shipping delays and that increases prices. People felt it here in the States, people felt it in Europe. But you were saying kind of in Japan, it was whatever, right? Because it's so close.
Yeah, I mean, the Suez Canal crisis, it's really impacting ocean freight all over the world, like going from like $2,000 something a container to over 5,000 and even more, right? Even if you're not bypassing through Suez Canal, because it has a ripple effect, because it's taking longer for the ships to go around like south of Africa, so it adds like 2 additional weeks. And most people don't realize you have to factor in for the containers as well, because the containers are used, so you have to have more empty containers to accommodate that. But if you look at the map, Japan is China's neighbor, right? So, I mean, a container from China to Japan can arrive in like a week. So it's really fast. I mean, compared to China, USA, 30, 45 days or even more, right? So you can definitely save a lot of time shipping if you're selling in Amazon Japan, shipping from China. And also you can save a lot of money as well, because distance wise, it's very close. I mean, literally, they're neighbors, right? So you will save a lot of money as well. And then in terms of sellers, we were talking with, Brandon Young, last year, and that was kind of like a light bulb moment for him, because if you can reduce the lead time, from when the factory ships out the good until you land it, you don't have to keep so much inventory, right? So rather than buying up like 3-4 months of inventory to stay in stock, you could cut that to, let's say, a month or 2 months inventory. So that for the seller, that frees up your cash flow as well, if you were to sell in Japan, from China to Japan, given the shorter lead times. That's why we feel like there's at least, this one big X factor for sellers. It would be an advantage to sell into Japan if you're sourcing from China. And actually not only China, because, as Nick had previously touched upon just a few minutes ago, if you're sourcing from other countries in Asia, there's actually free trade agreements between India and Japan, Vietnam and Japan, and Thailand and Japan. So it depends on your exact product, but your product could come in, if it's made in India, if you're exporting to Japan, you could land duty free, right? I mean, it could be zero. So and obviously there's no trade war going on between, China, Japan. So there's no Trump tariffs, and you could significantly reduce your landing cost. And obviously that would help every seller's, profit margins, right? If you're able to do that. So, there's a lot of these type of logistical advantages that Japan has that not a lot of sellers are aware of. And, you could land your product a lot cheaper, a lot faster, free up your cash flow selling in Japan compared to other countries. So we feel like that's one big advantage.
Yeah, I really need to get off my butt and do it. I've been saying I would, but I've just been so busy at Helium 10 that I haven't been able to expand any of my Amazon business almost. Like this week, I'm finally launching like 3 products for the first time in probably a year and a half. But yeah, I need to get.
Can we do a Project X Japan?
We should do that. Yeah, we should do
it, man.
Project
you heard it here first.
Yeah. Project X we'll be doing. All right.
Yes.
I like it. we'll do it anime with Japanese animation. We'll get Wit Studios to to do it for us.
Yeah.
Speaking of Japan and Japan, so we'll get back to the Amazon strategies, but let's talk a little bit about the 7-figure seller Japan Mastermind I attended last year. I'm probably going to attend this year. I'm not going like in an official capacity. I think I like it so much. I think I'm going to pay my own way. Because we have a certain budget for events at Helium 10, and then usually they rotate things. Or 1 year we'll do, like last year we did Prague, a European one. This year we're not doing that one, and then next year we might do it again or something. But this one wasn't on the list for our travel budget. But I'm a points hacker, so like I'm sure I could probably pay for a flight myself or make it not so much. And it's going to be in a place that I've been to Japan 40 times, lived in Japan, have never ever been, and that's Okinawa. So Gary, was it your decision to do it Okinawa since you had lived there before, or how did you decide that you're going to do this event in Okinawa?
Yeah, well, Okinawa, I mean, for those that don't know, it's known as the Hawaii of Japan. So there's beautiful beaches, it's, subtropical climate, and we were able to secure a fantastic resort hotel, the Hilton in Okinawa. So literally it's on the beach. I wanted to do it in Okinawa, and I was talking with Nick as well, because it's Japan, but it's a nice change of pace as well, right? So it's kind of like the Hawaii of Japan. And yeah, and then logistically, there's the airport. You can arrive there pretty conveniently at Naha Airport, and basically everyone's going to be there at the same place. We have 8-figure sellers, 7-figure Japan sellers. We have like all these different experts, every step of the way, right, from compliance to shipping, localization, etc. But yeah, I kind of wanted to give back to Okinawa as well, because during COVID, I mean, some of you guys know my family story. We weren't able to, because we were living in Shanghai before, and I'm American, and I couldn't go back to Shanghai, even though my wife is Chinese. I lived there 11 years. I paid all my taxes. I couldn't go back because they closed the border and my visa had expired. But Okinawa, they allowed us to stay on a temporary tourist visa for 2.5 years. So Okinawa also is like the poorest prefecture in Japan, and they really suffered a lot during COVID. So I'm just happy that, people can come visit. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to do in Okinawa, to kind of give back as well.
All right. Yeah. I'm a history buff. I'm a travel buff. So, all right, guys, you heard it here first. Like I'm committing that I'm going to go, so April 8th to 10th, if you guys want to join, like I have a forwarding website here to make it easier. Remember, just go to h10.me/Japan, and that'll bring you to sign up. And there will be, a lot of great speakers talking about local, selling in Japan strategies. And while I was there in last year, there was a couple interesting success stories. I saw one, I forgot his name, but one influencer who was doing 7 figures in Japan. I forgot his name, but Nick, maybe you can give us some other success stories, maybe of either local Japanese sellers or maybe somebody from a foreign marketplace, foreign to Japan, Europe or USA, getting started in Japan and being successful. Any stories you can relate?
So one of our clients is an international brand. They're an American registered company, and last year they cleared 7 figures, and we're definitely looking to do a lot more this year. And that's in 2 years. The sales currently are, so they're actually doing very, very
7
well
figures in US dollars. We're talking US dollars. Seven figures in Japanese yen is not too much, but you're saying you're talking about US dollars, right?
No. We're doing
that's pretty impressive.
We're doing 7 figures in yen a month now. So yeah, they're doing very, very well in America. They sell in Europe and they sell in Canada, but the Japanese sales are now almost comparable to the US sales, but the profit margins are a lot higher.
That was about to be my second question. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because things like the PPC is a hell of a lot cheaper. The ACOS for the account is about I think it's about 8-9% now. The TACOS is about 3 or 4%, and it's the kind of figures you can't really get in the US. So actually, in theory, you could sell a lot less in Japan and still end up with the same kind of profit as you could in the US. But obviously, if you're getting sales close to the US, you're probably going to have much higher margins. Japan
Really
generally is
interesting.
cheaper. It's cheaper tax as well. If you are of the threshold to pay tax, but if you're under 10 million yen, which is probably about was that 60, 70,000 US. If you're under that in sales, you don't have to pay consumption tax. There is no tax. So anybody like me selling in Europe who gets absolutely flossed by the tax
Yep.
authorities there, paying 19, 20, 21, 23% in some of the regions in Europe, you could be selling, 50, 60,000 US in Japan and not have to pay any consumption tax whatsoever. So there are definite advantages to selling in Japan.
Another advantage that I've seen is the kind of Amazon seller culture is a little bit different. So for example, the Chinese sellers and the foreign sellers there, they're used to, they're using a lot of Chinese tools. They're using Helium 10, to be able to do their keyword research. But one thing I noticed, at least last year or the year before, was that a lot of the Japanese-based sellers, even some of the bigger ones, it's like not in their business culture to really use like tools. Like they're not using Helium 10. They're not using the Chinese tools. And so sometimes you can go in there and like you might have these insights about keywords, running Cerebro. They wouldn't have any idea what reverse ASIN means. And you've got keywords that you can put in your listing that they might not even know because they're just maybe relying on PPC to find their keywords. Is that still kind of like the case where, tool usage is not widespread amongst the local Japanese selling community?
Yeah, definitely. I think it comes from the fact that most of the larger sellers were originally on Rakuten, and Rakuten, there aren't really as many kind of tools available, so they just haven't really kind of built up the systems and kind of the processes to handle that kind of data. So no, I don't think they are using as much. Obviously, the Chinese sellers are, but the local sellers don't think are anywhere near as much. Yeah,
that's definitely what I've noticed. Now, Gary, back to you. You've probably heard a lot of excuses. I just gave you an excuse of I don't have any time, to do it. But what are some of like the myths or excuses that you hear about what people think? Maybe it's their just conception of how selling in Japan is, or obstacles that really aren't there. What are some things that maybe you can debunk for those who might be timid to dip their feet into the Japanese waters over there?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest ones is language, because obviously Japanese language is very different. And, I don't really speak Japanese, and, I figured out how to sell in Japan because you don't need to actually know Japanese to sell in Japan. I mean, obviously it helps, but the fact that, number one, Amazon Seller Central Japan is all in English. So literally, if you know how to sell in the US or Europe, you can sell in Japan. And number two, in terms of the keyword research, obviously we have tools like Helium 10. So sellers can get smart if they're already familiar with how to do reverse ASIN searches and, all of that good stuff. You can do the same thing in Japan. And number three, now we have tools like AI, ChatGPT, and the translation feature. I mean, it's like miles ahead of Google Translate, like, what we're using just 2 years ago. So I'm able to use ChatGPT to really, get smart and even like dissect some of the Japanese competitors' listings to extract keywords to better understand that. So I feel like, that's one big, myth about Japan. And I feel at the same time, like all of these obstacles, talking about culture, talking about language, I kind of, I like that book, The Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday. Like, I don't know if you guys read that book. It's kind of like a stoicism book, but like these obstacles, actually, if you look at it from the flip side, right? A lot of people are intimidated by Japan, but if the fact that you learn how to do this, I mean, if you want to come to our conference, we'll literally guide you through it. You can leave no stone unturned. These obstacles actually become your moat, right? They're like a barrier against your competition, that they're intimidated by it. So I feel, for the certain seller that is motivated to do this, especially, I mean, this selling in Japan is really good for sellers that are already selling in the US or already selling in EU. They have SKUs, let's say, with like 700 reviews, 1,000 reviews. Why? Because you can actually carry over those reviews from Amazon US to Amazon Japan. So that way, when you launch on day one, you don't launch with 0 reviews. You launch with like 700 reviews. And like the review mode, I mean, the review, like the average review is a lot lower, like review score is a lot lower in Japan as well. So, I mean, so sellers, I mean, Japan's the 4th biggest market, but it still seems like a lot of people are either too intimidated or they don't know about it. So I'm really trying to help sellers, and Nick as well, right? We're trying to help sellers better, take advantage of this opportunity, even though it's 2024. Like what Nick said before, Japan is the niche, right? I mean, we're all talking about the riches are in the niches. I mean, in Japan, like the best-selling thick yoga mat, like I actually did like a comparison. Like in the US, the best-selling thick yoga mat has 4.6 stars and it has 75,000 reviews. So it's way too saturated, right? But in Japan, the best-selling thick yoga mat only had 3.9 stars and only 370 reviews, right? So you think about it. I mean, which one would you rather compete against, right? The yoga mat with 4.6 stars, 75,000 reviews, or Japan, right? And if you're already selling in the US, if you have 1,000 reviews, you can actually carry them over to Japan, and then you can be like, the king, right, from day one. So there's all of these advantages that sellers can have if they know how to do this to sell into Japan.
What else that we haven't talked about yet are people going to be able to learn about at the conference in April?
I think something that's new that we talked about is Rakuten, because everyone knows Amazon, right? But Rakuten, like what Nick said, they're literally neck and neck with Amazon. So we're going to bring in a speaker to talk about how to sell on Rakuten. And this way we can give the sellers, a balanced perspective, right? Amazon and Rakuten. We didn't have this last year. So this way we want to give sellers more information, because certain products may sell better on Amazon or on Rakuten. So this way you can have more perspective there. And then we're also talking about how to get into offline retail in Japan as well. So we're going to have some content there as well. So, I mean, if you're a seller, if you're going to make the investment to import your products into Japan, it kind of makes sense to maximize the different options that you have, right? So beyond Amazon, Rakuten, getting into physical retail stores. And then we're also going to talk about external marketing strategies. There's social media, and Nick is really good at this, like using Japan's social media platforms. I think this is information you're not going to get anywhere else. And we share like real examples from real sellers, what they're doing that you can take away, you can imitate. So I think these are all great opportunities. And also AI as well. I mean, AI is like super prevalent now. Japan is trying to like push AI a lot as well, because with like the labor costs and Japan is kind of like falling behind compared to the rest of the world, right? But they're looking to amplify AI. So we're trying to help sellers use AI to scale your business in Japan, even if you don't speak the language.
All right. So again, guys, if you didn't write down that address, how you can get more information on this conference, h10.me/Japan. Nick, maybe any last words about selling in Japan that you think foreign sellers need to know about the market, good or bad?
So I think one of the main things that people should really understand is that about half of the market in Amazon Japan, is made up of Chinese sellers. So although, we have these kind of podcasts and Gary is explaining to people about the fact that Amazon Japan is a very good marketplace, a lot of people who sell in Europe or the US, they might think about it, they might consider it. The Chinese, they know just how good it is, because they know there is very little competition, there's very little branding, and so they can ship products out to Japan and sell. They don't need to have very many reviews. If you are a seller who already has a brand and you've already got reviews on your products, all you need to do is list them in Japan. Global review syncing has been a thing for probably about 3 years now. You can start in Japan with more reviews than all the other sellers combined. You don't even need to have very many. Even if you've got 500, that might be more than all the people in the top 50. And so it's so much easier to launch in a marketplace where your main competition are Chinese non-face brands. They aren't even brands. They aren't even brand registered. Whereas you are a brand, you look good, you've got the assets, you've got the images, you've got the videos, and more importantly, the most important thing, you have the reviews. You are starting with more reviews than anybody else. I mean, there isn't any other better way to sell. You'll have cheaper conversions, you'll have cheaper PPC than everybody else. And I think that's probably the main thing.
Awesome. All right, guys. Well, if you're convinced already, well, hurry up and sign up for selling in Japan, and you could reach out to Nick and Gary for help from their network, or attend in person the event and meet a lot of these people who can help you in person while enjoying the Hawaii of Japan. So I look forward to seeing you guys in Okinawa in month or so now, and it'll be great to see you there, and hope to see some listeners there as well. So look forward to it.